I came home from Afghanistan 3 days early. No fanfare, no welcome committee, just me and my duffel bag standing on my own porch at 2 a.m., staring at a light in the bedroom window that shouldn't have been on. 20 years of military service taught me to trust my instincts, and right then, every nerve in my body was screaming that something was wrong. I should have listened. God, I should have turned around and come back in the morning like I'd originally planned. The house smelled different. After 6 months in the desert, you'd think any smell would be foreign, but this wasn't just unfamiliarity. It was wrong. Men's cologne, but not mine. The kind of expensive stuff I'd never waste money on, not when we had 2 kids in college and a mortgage to pay. I stood there in my combat boots, still dusty from Kandahar, breathing in another man's scent in my own home. My name's Jack Morrison. Master Sergeant, 82nd Airborne, 43 years old, and until that night, I thought I knew exactly who I was. A soldier. A husband. A father. A man who'd served his country with distinction through 3 tours in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan. I'd been shot at, mortared, and had an IED blow up 10 feet from my Humvee. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the war waiting in my own bedroom. Sarah and I met at Fort Bragg 22 years ago. She was working at the base library, this gorgeous brunette with green eyes that could stop traffic. I was just a young corporal, all muscle and bravado, trying to impress her by checking out books I'd never read. Tolstoy. Hemingway. She saw right through me, laughed at my terrible attempt at discussing War and Peace, and somehow agreed to dinner anyway. We got married 8 months later in a little chapel on base, her in a simple white dress, me in my dress blues, thinking I was the luckiest man alive. Those early years were golden. We survived deployments, base transfers, midnight phone calls from Baghdad. She was my rock, sending care packages filled with homemade cookies and pictures of the kids. When I got my first Purple Heart, she cried harder than when our daughter was born. "You promised to come home," she'd said, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. "You promised." And I had. Every single time, I came home to her. The first sign something was off came 3 months into this last deployment. Her emails got shorter. The video calls became less frequent. She'd say she was tired, busy with her new job at the real estate office, stressed about our son's grades. Reasonable excuses. I was 10,000 miles away, sleeping in a tent, eating MREs, and worried about keeping my soldiers alive. I didn't have the bandwidth to analyze the subtle shift in her voice, the way she'd look away from the camera, how she'd end calls quickly when someone walked into the room. Then came the credit card charges. Small things at first, restaurants I didn't recognize, wine bars we'd never been to together. Sarah handling the finances while I was deployed was normal. But a $300 dinner at La Bernardine? On a Tuesday? When she told me she was home with a migraine? The math didn't add up. Still, I pushed the doubt down. This was Sarah. My Sarah. The woman who'd waited through 5 deployments, who'd raised our kids practically alone, who'd never given me a single reason to doubt her loyalty. My buddy Tom noticed before I did. We were on patrol outside Kabul when he asked, "Everything okay at home, Sarge?" I must have looked confused because he continued, "You've been checking your phone like it's gonna explode. And you got that 1,000-yard stare, but we ain't seen combat in weeks." I brushed him off, told him I was just tired. But Tom was right. I was looking at her Facebook posts, analyzing every photo, every check-in, every male name that liked or commented. When had I become this person? The turning point came during what should have been a normal video call. It was her birthday. I'd arranged for flowers to be delivered, had the whole squad singing off-key, "Happy Birthday," that made her laugh. But behind her, on our bed, was a second pillow with an indent. Someone had been sleeping on my side of the bed. When I asked about it, she quickly flipped the camera away, said the dog had been sleeping there. We don't have a dog. Haven't had one since Buster died 3 years ago. After that call, I became a detective in my own life. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. Afghanistan time to check her Facebook, looking for clues. I studied our bank statements like intelligence reports. Every inconsistency became a red flag. The gym membership she'd never mentioned. The weekend trips to her sister's house, when her sister was posting from vacation in Florida. The new lingerie charges when she told me she was too stressed to even think about that stuff. My squad started noticing. I was distracted, short-tempered, making rookie mistakes. During a routine convoy, I missed a turn because I was thinking about a text she'd sent, something about working late again. My lieutenant pulled me aside, asked if I needed to talk. How could I explain that while we were fighting the Taliban, I was losing a different war entirely? That every night, I'd lie in my cot wondering who was lying in my bed? Subscribe if you want to hear how this ends. Trust me, you won't see it coming. The evidence mounted like casualties in a battle report. Her girlfriend Lisa accidentally mentioned Sarah's new friend from the gym during a group video call with the other military wives. Sarah's face went white, and she quickly changed the subject. There were charges for men's clothing at Nordstrom, claimed they were gifts for my birthday. But my birthday was 4 months away, and since when did she shop at Nordstrom? The cologne in our bathroom in the background of one of her selfies, Creed Aventus, $400 a bottle. I googled it from a combat outpost's spotty internet connection, my hands shaking. 2 weeks before I was supposed to come home, I found the smoking gun. She'd forgotten to log out of her email on our shared iPad, and it synced to my phone. There it was, in her sent folder, reservations for 2 at the Ritz-Carlton in Charlotte. The same weekend she told me she was visiting her sick mother. The reservation was under her name, and Michael Patterson. I knew that name. He was her personal trainer at the gym, the one she'd mentioned in passing, said he was helping her get in shape for my homecoming. I sat in that dusty tent, surrounded by the sounds of a forward operating base, generators humming, helicopters passing overhead, soldiers laughing at something on someone's phone, and felt everything inside me break. Not crack, not bend, but completely shatter. 22 years. 2 kids. 5 deployments. Countless nights of her crying in my arms before I left, begging me to be safe, to come home to her. All of it was a lie, or had become one. My commanding officer noticed immediately. "Morrison, you look like hell." I wanted to tell him everything, to request emergency leave, to fly home and confront her. But I didn't. I had 3 days left in country. 3 days to plan. 3 days to decide whether my marriage, my life as I knew it, was worth saving. I spent those days going through the motions, patrols, briefings, equipment checks, while my mind worked through scenarios like a tactical operation. The flight home was agony. 18 hours of recycled air and racing thoughts. The soldier next to me, a kid maybe 22, kept talking about surprising his girlfriend. He'd bought a ring at the base exchange, was planning to propose the moment he saw her. I wanted to grab him, shake him, tell him to be careful, that love was a battlefield more dangerous than anything we'd faced in Afghanistan. But I just nodded, wished him luck, and stared out the window at the ocean below. Which brings me back to that moment on my porch. 3 days early. No warning. My key turning in the lock sounded like a round being chambered. The house was quiet except for music coming from upstairs. Marvin Gaye, the same album we played on our wedding night. Each step on our hardwood stairs felt like walking through a minefield. The bedroom door was cracked open, soft light spilling into the hallway. I could hear voices, laughter, the clink of wine glasses. I pushed open the door to find Sarah in our bed with a man I recognized from her Facebook photos. Michael Patterson, the personal trainer with the perfect smile, and the $400 cologne. The wine glasses fell, Merlot spreading across our white sheets like blood. Sarah's face went from ecstasy to horror in a heartbeat. She pulled the sheet up, as if modesty mattered now, and said the words that would echo in my head for months. "Jack? You're not supposed to be home yet." "Not. I'm sorry." "Not. I can explain." Just logistics. Just inconvenience. 22 years, and I'd become in scheduling conflict. That night, standing in my own bedroom, still wearing my ACUs, desert dust still in my hair, I realized something. I'd survived 5 deployments, enemy fire, and countless close calls. But this was different. That night, I knew my war had just begun. The next 3 seconds stretched like hours. Michael, this sculpted gym rat in my bed, with my wife, scrambled for his clothes while stammering something about not knowing I was military. Sarah sat frozen, the sheet clutched to her chest, her mouth opening and closing like she was drowning in air. And me? I stood there in full combat gear, my ruck still on my back, feeling the weight of my sidearm on my hip, and did absolutely nothing. 20 years of combat training, and I just stood there, watching my life detonate in slow motion. Jack, please, let me explain. Sarah started, but I held up my hand. One finger. That's all it took to silence her. In that moment, she wasn't my wife. She was just another hostile in a combat zone, and I needed to assess the situation before engaging. Michael was pulling on his designer jeans, true religion, I noticed, probably $300 a pair. The kind of jeans a man buys when he's trying to impress someone else's wife. Get out, I said to Michael. My voice came out steady, controlled. The command voice I used with new recruits. He looked at Sarah, actually had the audacity to look at my wife for permission in my house, and that's when something inside me shifted from shock to rage. I said, get out. You have 10 seconds before I throw you out the window. 1 Mississippi. He ran. Grabbed his shirt, his shoes, that expensive cologne from the dresser, and ran barefoot down the stairs. I heard the front door slam, his car starting, tires squealing as he fled like the coward he was. Never even looked me in the eye. 20-year-old me would have chased him down, would have beaten him into the pavement. But 43-year-old me, the me who'd learned that violence only creates more problems, just stood there watching his taillights disappear into the Virginia night. Have you ever wanted revenge so bad you could taste it? Comment below. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we don't fight. Sarah was crying now, trying to get dressed while sobbing out explanations. It's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looked like adultery to me. We never meant for it to happen. Oh, so the wine, the candles, the lingerie I could see on the floor, that was all accidental? I was lonely. And I was getting shot at in Afghanistan, but sure, tell me about lonely. I walked to the closet, pulled out my civilian duffel bag, the one I used for temporary duty assignments, and started packing. Not her stuff, mine. My hands moved automatically. 7 days of clothes, toiletries, important papers from the safe. Sarah followed me, naked under a silk robe I didn't recognize, begging, pleading, making promises. We can work through this, she said. Think about the kids, she said. It meant nothing, she said. How long? I asked, folding my discharge papers, my DD-214, the document that proved my 20 years of service. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, like when I was disarming an IED. What? She was sitting on the bed now, our bed, the crime scene, looking small and pathetic. How long have you been fucking him? The crude word made her flinch. Good. We were past the point of polite conversation. Jack, please, how long? 4 months, she whispered. 4 months. I'd been gone 6. Which meant she'd waited exactly 8 weeks before climbing into bed with another man. 8 weeks of me eating sand, dodging mortars, and writing her love emails from a tent that smelled like diesel fuel and desperation. I did the math in my head. That was roughly 120 days of deception, 120. I love yous. Over video chat while another man's cologne was probably still on her skin. I found a hotel near base, a depressing comfort in that catered to soldiers in transition, divorces, deployments, disciplinary actions. The desk clerk, a veteran himself judging by the eagle, globe, and anchor tattoo on his forearm, took one look at me and didn't ask questions. Just handed me the key and said, "Thank you for your service." I wanted to laugh. Or cry. Or both. That first night alone, I didn't sleep. I sat on that scratchy hotel bedspread and planned my next moves like a military operation. Intelligence gathering would come first. I needed to know everything, when it started, how it started, who knew, what they'd done, where they'd been. Every single detail would matter in the coming war. The next morning, I called my battle buddy from my first deployment, Marcus Williams, who'd become a private investigator after his medical discharge. "I need your help, brother," I said, and then told him everything. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Jesus, Jack. Sarah? Are you sure?" "I walked in on them, Marcus. In my bed. My fucking bed. Okay. Okay, brother. I got you. Full surveillance package. Financial forensics. Social media deep dive. The works. And Jack? I'm sorry, man. I'm so fucking sorry." While Marcus worked his magic, I worked mine. 20 years in the military teaches you about intelligence gathering, and I applied every lesson. First, the finances. I pulled 3 years of bank statements, credit card records, investment accounts. Started a spreadsheet, color-coded by category. Green for normal expenses, yellow for suspicious, red for confirmed infidelity-related charges. The red column grew like a casualty list. Hotels I'd never stayed at. Restaurants dated during times she'd claimed to be at book club. A weekend in Asheville when she'd supposedly been caring for her sick mother, her mother who, I confirmed with a phone call, had been perfectly healthy and in Florida that weekend. There was jewelry from Tiffany's, charged to our joint card, that I'd never seen her wear. Where was it? On some other woman? Had he been using my money to court other women while sleeping with my wife? The credit cards told a story of escalating betrayal. It started small, coffee charges at the same time, always 2 drinks. Then lunches. Then dinners. Then the hotel charges started appearing, always on days when I knew I'd be on missions, unable to call. She'd planned it around my schedule. Used my service to my country as her opportunity to service another man. I dug deeper. Phone records showed hundreds of texts to his number, starting at 5 a.m. some days, right after I'd call from Afghanistan before my patrol. She'd talk to me, tell me she loved me, then immediately text him. The data usage showed picture messages. Videos. My stomach turned thinking about what those might contain. Hours-long phone calls on nights when she told me she was going to bed early. Marcus called 3 days later. "You sitting down? Just tell me. It's worse than just the trainer. She's been on dating apps, Jack. Tinder. Bumble. While you were deployed. Using photos from your anniversary trip to Hawaii last year. Have you ever discovered the person you loved was living a complete double life? Share below. You're not alone." I drove to our house. I couldn't call it home anymore, while she was at work. Used my key, legally entered my own property, and began documenting everything. I photographed the bedroom, the new sheets, 600 thread count, Egyptian cotton, $400 according to the credit card statement, the men's grooming products in the master bathroom, the box of condoms in her nightstand. We hadn't used condoms in 15 years. In the closet, I found the evidence that broke something inside me I didn't know could still break. A shoebox full of cards and letters. Not from him, from me. Every letter I'd written from deployment. Every anniversary card. Every, just because, note I'd left on her pillow before a mission. She'd kept them all, while simultaneously destroying everything they represented. Below them, wrapped in tissue paper, was the negligee I'd sent her from Dubai, tag still on, never worn. But there were 3 new sets from Victoria's Secret, definitely worn, that I'd never seen. The garage held his motorcycle helmet. His gym bag. A pair of his running shoes. He'd been living in my space, using my tools. My socket set was on the workbench, recently used, parking his bike where I parked my truck. The neighbors must have seen him coming and going. Everyone knew except the fool in Afghanistan writing love letters to a ghost. I installed a voice-activated recorder in my home office, completely legal, my lawyer assured me later, as it was my property, and I was recording my own conversations. Then I waited for Sarah to come home, sitting in the kitchen like a sniper in a hide sight, patient and prepared. She walked in carrying takeout from my favorite Chinese place, a peace offering that felt more like an insult. "Jack! I didn't know you'd be here. I brought dinner. Sit down." She sat, arranging the takeout containers like a barrier between us. General Tso's chicken, my usual. She remembered that but forgot her wedding vows. The irony wasn't lost on me. I know about the dating apps. I started, voice flat. I know about the hotels. I know you've been using my deployment schedule to schedule your affairs. I know about Asheville. I know about the $1,000 you spent on lingerie that you never wore for me. I know about the... Stop. She was crying again, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. Please, just stop. Why? You didn't stop. For months, you said? That's a lie too, isn't it? She broke. Not dramatically, not all at once, but piece by piece, like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The truth came out in chunks between sobs. It had started 8 months ago, not 4. Before I'd even deployed. She met Michael at the gym, cliché, I know, and he'd paid attention to her. Listened to her. Made her feel young and desired. You were always gone, she said, as if that justified anything. Even when you were home, you were thinking about your soldiers, your missions, your career. I was lonely, Jack. I've been lonely for years. So you decided to fill that loneliness with another man's. Don't be crude. Crude? You want to talk about crude? How about fucking another man in the bed where our children were conceived? Is that crude enough? She flinched. Good. I wanted her to flinch. I wanted her to feel a fraction of what I was feeling. The kids don't know, she said quietly. They will. Jack, please. We can work through this. Couples therapy. I'll do anything. Have you heard these promises? The desperate bargaining? Comment below if you fell for it or walked away. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Couples therapy? Sarah, I walked in on you with another man. You've been on dating apps while I was getting shot at for our country. You spent our anniversary in Asheville with him. What exactly is therapy going to fix? I made a mistake. No. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is burning dinner. This was a choice. Hundreds of choices, actually. Every text, every kiss, every time you took your wedding ring off to be with him, those were all choices. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor like fingernails on a chalkboard. I've hired a lawyer. You'll be served papers within the week. I want you to think very carefully about how you want this to go. We can do this quietly, split everything fairly, minimize the damage to the kids. Or we can do this publicly, and everyone, your parents, your friends, your coworkers, will know exactly what you did while I was serving our country. She stood too, reached for me. I stepped back like she was contagious. Jack, I love you. No, I said, heading for the door. You love the idea of me. The military benefits. The social status of being a military wife. The security I provided. But me? You haven't loved me in a long time. Maybe you never really did. As I drove back to my hotel, I thought about the intelligence Marcus had gathered. The dating profiles where she described herself as separated and looking for adventure. The messages to multiple men, not just Michael. The review she'd left for a local wine bar. Perfect for discreet meetings. She'd spelled discreet wrong, but the intent was clear. I also thought about the conversation I'd recorded. Virginia is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of. Her admissions, her timeline, her excuses, all admissible in court. My lawyer, a former JAG officer who specialized in military divorces, had been clear. Document everything. Record everything. Save everything. In divorce court, especially with adultery, evidence is ammunition. That night in the hotel, I finally called my kids. Our daughter, Jennifer, was in her junior year at Virginia Tech. Our son, David, was a freshman at James Madison. They knew something was wrong. Sarah had apparently been crying to them about me being distant and cold since I'd returned. Dad, what's going on? Jennifer asked. Mom says you moved out? Your mother and I are having some problems, I said carefully. Adult problems. It has nothing to do with you two. Are you getting divorced? David's voice cracked a little. 19 years old, and his voice still cracked when he was emotional. If you have kids and you're going through this, drop a comment. How did you tell them? I need all the advice I can get. I don't know yet. I lied. I knew exactly what was happening. The papers were already drawn up. But they didn't need to know that yet. Whatever happens, I love you both. That will never change. After I hung up, I sat in that sterile hotel room and planned my next move. Sarah didn't know about Marcus's investigation. She didn't know I'd hired a forensic accountant to trace the money she'd been siphoning from our accounts. She didn't know I'd already separated our finances, that I'd moved my military retirement payments to a new account she couldn't access. She also didn't know that Michael Patterson was married. Yeah, the personal trainer with the perfect abs and the expensive cologne had a wife and 2 kids in Charlotte. A wife who deserved to know what her husband had been doing during his late-night training sessions and weekend fitness retreats. I had her contact information, photos Marcus had taken of Michael and Sarah together, credit card records showing the hotels they'd used. The question wasn't whether I'd tell her. The question was when. I also discovered something else during my investigation. Sarah had been telling people I was abusive. Not physically, even she wouldn't stoop that low, but emotionally. She'd been laying the groundwork for months, telling her friends I was controlling, jealous, paranoid. Classic gaslighting, preparing her defense before I even knew I was under attack. Her friend group, the other gym moms and wine night warriors, had been fed a steady diet of, poor Sarah, stories while I was overseas. But I had allies too. Tom's wife, Maria, called me after hearing through the spouse network what had happened. Jack, I'm so sorry. We suspected something, but Sarah always had an explanation. The other wives, we should have told you. How many people knew? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Most of the gym crowd. Some of the FRG, Family Readiness Group, ladies. Michael, he wasn't subtle. He'd pick her up in his Mustang, rev the engine like some teenager. It was embarrassing. Embarrassing. My wife's affair was embarrassing. 20 years of honorable service, and I'd become the cuckold of Fort Bragg. Have you ever found out everyone knew before you? That betrayal on top of betrayal? Let me know in the comments. I threw myself into the divorce preparations like it was a military campaign. I had spreadsheets tracking assets, calendars documenting her affairs, recordings of her admissions. My lawyer was impressed. Most people are too emotional to be this organized, he said. I'm not most people, I replied. I'm a soldier. This is just another mission. But late at night, when the hotel room was quiet and the sounds of other people's normal lives filtered through the thin walls, I wasn't a soldier. I was just a man whose wife had chosen someone else. A man who'd written love letters from a war zone to a woman who was already gone. A man who'd missed birthdays and anniversaries for the sake of duty, only to come home to an empty bed and a broken promise. The next confrontation came a week later. Sarah had been calling, texting, emailing, a bombardment of apologies and promises. I'd ignored them all, communicated only through my lawyer. But she forced the issue by showing up at my hotel, making a scene in the lobby, demanding to talk. I met her in the parking lot, neutral territory. She'd dressed carefully, the sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary, her hair done, makeup perfect. She was trying to remind me of better times. It might have worked if I hadn't known she'd worn that same dress to meet Michael at the Ritz. The papers came, she said, holding the divorce filing like it was toxic. Adultery? You're really claiming adultery? You really committed adultery, I responded. Multiple times. With multiple men, apparently. Her face went white. How did you? I know everything, Sarah. Every hotel, every dinner, every lie. I know about Charlotte. I know about Asheville. I know about the dating apps. I know you've been poisoning the well with your friends, setting me up as the bad guy. I know it all. You hired someone to follow me? She tried for indignant, but it came out scared. I hired someone to find the truth. and boy did they find it. She started crying again, but these weren't the tears of sorrow. These were tears of frustration, of someone who'd been caught and couldn't lie their way out. What do you want? I want a divorce. Quick, clean, uncontested. You get the house. I don't want to sleep in that contaminated bedroom anyway. We split the retirement, the savings, everything down the middle. Shared custody of what's left with the kids' college years. You don't contest it, and Michael's wife never has to know what her husband's been up to. Her head snapped up. You wouldn't. Try me. That's blackmail. No, that's negotiation. You should understand that. You've been negotiating with the truth for months. Have you ever had to play hardball in a divorce? Drop a comment about your strategy. She agreed, of course. What choice did she have? But she had one more card to play, one more manipulation. I'm pregnant, she said quietly. The world tilted. Everything I'd planned, everything I'd prepared for, crumbled in those two words. Pregnant. After 15 years of careful planning, of agreed-upon family planning, she was pregnant. Is it mine? The question tasted like ashes. I don't know. And there it was. The final destruction of everything we'd built. Not only had she betrayed me, but she potentially created a life with another man while I was fighting for our country. The ultimate insult to injury. Get a paternity test, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. If it's mine, we'll co-parent. If it's not, that's your problem to sort out with Michael. Or whoever else you've been with. Jack. We're done here. I walked away from her standing in that parking lot, her sundress rippling in the evening breeze, looking like a ghost of the woman I'd married. But ghosts aren't real, and neither was the marriage I thought I'd had. It was time to stop being haunted and start being strategic. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just divorce Sarah, I'd reclaim my life. Every part of it. The respect she'd cost me, the dignity she'd stolen, the future she'd destroyed. I'd rebuild it all, stronger and better than before. And I'd do it with military precision. I had fought enemies abroad. Now I was preparing for the enemy at home. But this time, I knew exactly who the enemy was, what they'd done, and exactly how to defeat them. The intelligence was gathered. The battle lines were drawn. Now it was time for the war. The real war was about to begin. The paternity test took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Sarah calling, texting, showing up at the hotel, at the base, even at my lawyer's office. She was unraveling, and I watched it happen with the cold detachment of a sniper watching a target through a scope. The woman who'd been so careful, so calculated in her deception, was now making mistakes. Big ones? First mistake, she went to my commanding officer. Colonel Richards called me into his office on a Thursday morning, looking uncomfortable behind his desk. Sergeant Morrison, your wife was here. He pushed a box of tissues across his desk. Apparently, she'd cried through the entire meeting. She's claiming you've abandoned your family, that you're having some kind of PTSD episode. I placed a folder on his desk. Sir, with all due respect, here's the real situation. Inside were photos Marcus had taken, Sarah and Michael entering hotels, kissing in parking lots, the dating app profiles. I discovered my wife's infidelity upon returning from deployment. I'm handling it through legal channels. My mental health is fine. My judgment is clear. This is a personal matter that won't affect my duties. Richards looked through the photos, his jaw tightening. His own wife had left him during his second tour in Iraq. He understood. Sergeant, take whatever time you need. And if she shows up here again, I'll have the MPs escort her off base. Second mistake, Sarah tried to empty our joint savings account. What she didn't know was that I'd already legally frozen it, pending the divorce proceedings. The bank called me when she tried to withdraw $30,000 in cash. The teller said she'd made quite a scene, demanded to speak to managers, threatened to sue. But the freeze was legitimate, the paperwork solid. She left empty-handed and humiliated. Third mistake, and the biggest one, she brought Michael to our son's football game. David called me, furious. Dad, Mom's here with that guy. That fucking trainer. He's sitting in your seat, wearing JMU colors like he belongs here. The whole team's parents are staring. It's humiliating. I was already in the car. I'm 20 minutes out. Don't do anything stupid. Dad, I want to hit him. Don't. That's what he wants, to paint us as the violent, unstable military family. Be smarter than that. I arrived at halftime to find my son on the bench, refused to play. The coach, an old Marine himself, filled me in. Your boy told that man if he didn't leave, he'd knock his teeth out on the field. I had to bench him to keep him from getting arrested. No disrespect, Sergeant, but your wife's lost her damn mind bringing her boyfriend here. I found them in the stands. Sarah in designer sunglasses, trying to look unbothered. Michael in a JMU jersey, number 12, my son's number. The audacity of it made my vision narrow to a tunnel. But I'd learned long ago that rage without purpose is just wasted energy. Michael! I said his name once, clear and calm. He turned, and I saw fear flash across his face. Good. You're in my seat. Jack, don't make a scene, Sarah started. I'm not going to make anything. Michael is going to leave. Now. Or I'm going to very quietly explain to everyone in these stands, including the 3 police officers here for security, exactly who he is and what he's been doing. Starting with your wife, Michael. She's in Charlotte, right? With your 2 kids? Ages 7 and 9? He went pale. You contacted Melissa? Not yet. But I have her number. Her email. Her Facebook. Her parents' information. Her sister in Raleigh. Your employer's HR department. That's the thing about affairs, Michael. They thrive in darkness. Let's shine some light on yours. He left. Didn't say goodbye to Sarah, didn't apologize, just walked to his Mustang and drove away. Sarah followed minutes later, but not before several of the other parents made their feelings known. Military communities are tight-knit. When you betray one of us, you betray all of us. David played the second half like a man possessed. 3 touchdowns. His coach said it was the best he'd ever seen him play. Sometimes anger, properly channeled, can be fuel, he told me after. You taught him that. The paternity results came the following Tuesday. My lawyer called me at 0600. Jack, you sitting down? Just tell me. The child isn't yours. Relief and rage washed over me simultaneously. Relief that I wouldn't be tied to this betrayal forever. Rage that she tried to pass another man's child off as mine. The calculation of it, the cruelty. She'd known there was a chance it wasn't mine and had still tried to use it as leverage. I met her one last time to sign the divorce papers. She looked different, hollow, defeated. The pregnancy was showing now, for months along. Michael had left her, gone back to his wife, who'd taken him back after he'd agreed to counseling and signed a post-nuptial agreement that would leave him with nothing if he cheated again. Sarah was alone, pregnant with a married man's child, about to be divorced, and facing single motherhood at 41. I ruined everything, she said, pen hovering over the signature line. Yes, you did. Do you hate me? I thought about it, really considered the question. No. Hate requires emotional investment. I nothing you. You're just someone I used to know. She signed. I signed. 22 years ended with ink on paper. But the story doesn't end there. See, I'd learned something important during my investigation. Sarah and Michael weren't the only ones with secrets. The owner of the gym where they'd met, where their affair had flourished, was running a side business. He was dealing steroids, HGH, and other performance enhancers to his trainers and select clients. Michael was not only a customer but a distributor. I could have gone to the police immediately. Instead, I sent an anonymous tip to the DA, complete with documentation I'd gathered. The gym was raided 2 months after my divorce was finalized. Michael was arrested, charged with distribution. He lost his certification, his job, and ultimately, his family when his wife discovered the extent of his involvement. Sarah, 7 months pregnant and living in her parents' garage, called me crying when she heard. You did this. You destroyed his life. No, Sarah. He destroyed his own life. just like you destroyed ours. I just made sure the authorities knew about it. Consider it my parting gift." The baby was born in December. A boy. Sarah named him Michael Jr., which told me everything about her state of mind. Mutual friends told me she struggled, that single motherhood wasn't the adventure she'd imagined. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by Walmart maternity wear. The Lexus was repossessed. The house we'd built together was sold to pay for lawyers and debts she'd hidden. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. Slowly, methodically, like reconstructing after a bombing. I bought a small house near base, nothing fancy but mine alone. I reconnected with my kids, who'd chosen to live with me once they learned the full truth. Jennifer changed her major to law, said she wanted to help people like me navigate betrayal. David joined ROTC, following in my footsteps but determined to be smarter about love. I started therapy, not couples counseling, but individual work to process the betrayal trauma. My therapist, a former Navy psychologist, understood military culture. "You were deployed twice," she said. "Once to Afghanistan, once in your own marriage. Both were war zones. Both left scars." 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Tom and Maria at the commissary. They invited me to dinner, insisted actually. There was someone they wanted me to meet. I resisted, but Tom pulled rank. Technically, he'd been promoted to lieutenant colonel while I was dealing with my divorce. Her name was Angela. A widow, her husband Kia in Syria 3 years prior. She understood loss, understood betrayal by circumstance if not by choice. She was a nurse at the base hospital, had 2 teenagers, and didn't play games. Our first conversation lasted until 3 a.m., covering everything from deployment stress to single parenthood to the challenge of trusting again. "I'm not looking for someone to complete me," she said over coffee. "I'm complete. I'm looking for someone to complement me." We took it slow. Dinners. Movies. Long walks where we talked about everything and nothing. She met my kids at a barbecue. They met hers at a baseball game. No rush, no pressure, just 2 people who'd been through hell and were carefully, cautiously, finding their way back to happiness. A year after the divorce, I retired. 21 years of service, full benefits, full honors. Sarah wasn't invited to the ceremony, obviously, but she tried to come anyway. The gate guards, briefed by Colonel Richards, turned her away. She sat in the parking lot, I was told, watching through the fence as I received my retirement medal, as my kids pinned on my civilian lapel pin, as Angela stood in the crowd, smiling. The retirement speech was supposed to be about service, sacrifice, and honor. Instead, I talked about resilience. About how the hardest battles aren't always on foreign soil. About how sometimes the enemy wears a familiar face, shares your bed, knows your vulnerabilities. But mostly, I talked about rebuilding after destruction, about finding honor in survival, about the brotherhood and sisterhood that catches you when you fall. Tom spoke after me, unauthorized but unchallenged. "Sergeant Morrison exemplifies the warrior spirit not just in combat, but in life. He faced betrayal with dignity, injustice with strategy, and came out stronger. If that's not military bearing, I don't know what is." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Sarah, still in the parking lot, drove away before it ended. 2 years have passed since that night I came home early. I'm working as a security consultant now, using my military experience in the civilian sector. Angela and I bought a house together, not married yet, but moving in that direction carefully, with prenups already discussed and boundaries clearly established. My kids are thriving. Jennifer passed the bar exam, David commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant. Sarah? She's a cautionary tale told in whispers at military spouse gatherings. Last I heard, she was working as a receptionist, fighting Michael for child support he refuses to pay from prison, living in an apartment complex known for Section 8 housing. Her Instagram, once full of gym selfies and wine nights, has been deleted. Her friends, the ones who enabled and encouraged her affair, have distanced themselves now that she's no longer useful to their social climbing. But this isn't about Schadenfreude. This isn't about delighting in her downfall. This is about survival, about justice, about rebuilding after someone you trusted with your life destroys everything you built together. It's about the kind of victory that doesn't come with medals or commendations, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing you handled yourself with honor when honor was all you had left. I keep one photo from my marriage, not of Sarah, but of my kids when they were young, at a military ball, proud of their dad in uniform. It reminds me that not everything from those 22 years was a lie. My children were real. My service was real. My honor was real. And in the end, those are the things that survived the betrayal. Sometimes, late at night, when Angela is sleeping beside me and the house is quiet, I think about that night on my porch. Coming home early, seeing that light that shouldn't have been on, smelling that cologne that wasn't mine. I think about how different my life would be if I'd come home on schedule, if I'd never caught them, if I'd lived in ignorance while the betrayal continued. Would that have been better? Living a lie in comfort rather than facing the truth in pain? No. Never. Because here's what 20 years of military service taught me that Sarah never understood. Honor isn't just about how you act when people are watching. It's about who you are in the dark, when no one's looking, when you could get away with anything. She failed that test. I passed it. And in the end, that's all that matters. Not the house we lost, not the marriage that died, not even the years wasted on someone who didn't deserve them. What matters is that when tested, when pushed to my absolute limit, when everything I loved was stripped away, I maintained my integrity. I fought with honor. I won with dignity. In war and in life, honor is all that matters. And honor, unlike love, cannot be betrayed. It can only be surrendered. And that's something I'll never do.